king of Ammon, answered Jephthah's messengers, "When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they stole my land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, and all the way to the Jordan. Now then, give back the land peaceably." But King Sihon didn't trust Israel to pass through his land. Instead, he mobilized his army at Jahaz and attacked them. But the Lord, the God of Israel, gave his people victory over King Sihon. So Israel took control of all the land of the Amorites, who lived in that region. So you see, it was the Lord, the God of Israel, who took away the land from the Amorites and gave it to Israel. Why then should we give it back to you? You keep whatever your god Chemosh gives you, and we will keep whatever the Lord our God gives us. What's up, cool people? My name is Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay. So we're looking at Judges chapter 11, and in the previous chapter, the bulk of it was just kind of setting the scene for this, I guess. It mentioned how the Philistines and the Ammonites basically, took control of Israel, or at least portions of it, because, Israelites had started worshiping other gods again, and it was seemingly a multitude of other gods in this particular situation. So at first, when they asked for help from the Lord, he says, "Why don't you get one of your other gods to help you? There's so many of them. Surely one of them can help you." It wasn't worded exactly like that, but that was the general gist. But they get rid of all the other idols from the other gods and, turn back to the Lord, and then he starts having sympathy on them again. So, that's the scene for what we get into here. So, here we go. Judges chapter 11. Now Jephthah of Gilead was a great warrior. He was the son of Gilead, but his mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also had several sons, and when these half-brothers grew up, they chased Jephthah off the land. "You will not get any of our father's inheritance," they said, "for you are the son of a prostitute." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the town of Tob. Soon he had a band of worthless rebels following him. So when it says worthless rebels there, I get the sense more so that it was just like they were troublemakers, rabble-rousers, some term more like that. Kind of societal outcasts. And definitely the kind of people who I think would have been inclined to, break the rules a bit and not always really do what was right. But that's a bit of an assumption on my part about the character of these people. I would definitely think it's safe to assume, at least, that they were outcasts of a sort. Because, Jephthah himself is basically an outcast in this situation because his brothers don't really accept him, or half-brothers more like. Because they were all sons of Gilead's actual wife, whereas Jephthah was... back in those days, I don't know if they would have so much called it an affair, but... basically, Jephthah was born of a different woman who was not Gilead's wife. Anyway, verse 4. At about this time, the Ammonites began their war against Israel. When the Ammonites attacked, the elders of Gilead sent for Jephthah in the land of Tob. The elders said, "Come and be our commander. Help us fight the Ammonites." But Jephthah said to them, "Aren't you the ones who hated me and drove me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?" "Because we need you," the elders replied. if you lead us in battle against the Ammonites, we will make you ruler over all the people of Gilead. Okay. Not really surprising given what had happened in previous things. I'm also noticing, I don't know if this is going to be a trend continuing throughout the rest of Judges, or at least further on into it, but Abimelech was pretty much chosen by the people as judge, and now we've got these people choosing Jephthah as judge slash, ruler. Whereas, the first few judges, it was at least worded more so in a way that it was like, okay, well, this was God, choosing such and such person, and the people just kind of, accepted or, realized the abilities, the leadership abilities or the combat skills or whatever of the judge that God had chosen. Now, of course, Jephthah's fighting abilities here might have been part of the way that God chose him. So I'm not outright saying it's a totally different situation, but the way it's worded makes it seem like the people are relying less on God and, his timing and who he brings up, and more so just like choosing for themselves, or maybe even kind of discerning, to put a slightly more positive possible spin on it. Maybe they're, discerning who God is choosing more so than just relying on it, somewhat just coming to them by God's choosing. I don't know. Feel free to let me know if that wasn't exactly worded the best, but anywho, I'm noticing a difference in the wording here versus earlier in Judges. But anyway, so I think I left it off at verse 9. Jephthah said to the elders, "Let me get this straight. If I come with you, and if the Lord gives me victory over the Ammonites, will you really make me ruler over all the people?" "The Lord is our witness," the elders replied. "We promise to do whatever you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him their ruler and commander of the army. At Mizpah, in the presence of the Lord, Jephthah repeated what he had said to the elders. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of Ammon, asking, "Why have you come out to fight against my land?" The king of Ammon answered Jephthah's messengers, "When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they stole my land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, and all the way to the Jordan. Now then, give back the land peaceably." Okay. See, that's actually a somewhat legitimate land dispute kind of thing. But at the same time, the Israelites probably wouldn't be inclined to just give back the land, because it was land that was promised to them by God. And honestly, that goes way, way back to Abraham, essentially. Probably well before a lot of these other kingdoms were any sort of decently established. But anyway, so with Jephthah as leader, they kind of get the ball rolling on responding to the Ammonite threat. So they've exchanged a little bit, a couple of messages here and there. king of Ammon wants the land back from, back when Moses led the people out of Egypt. And then we get to verse 14. Jephthah sent this message back to the Ammonite king. This is what Jephthah says. Israel did not steal any land from Moab or Ammon. When the people of Israel arrived at Kadesh on their journey from Egypt after crossing the Red Sea, they sent messengers to the king of Edom asking for permission to pass through his land, but their request was denied. Then they asked the king of Moab for similar permission, but he wouldn't let them pass through either. So the people of Israel stayed in Kadesh. Finally, they went around Edom and Moab through the wilderness. They traveled along Moab's eastern border and camped on the other side of the Arnon River. But they never once crossed the Arnon River into Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. Then Israel sent messengers to King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled from Heshbon, asking for permission to cross through his land to get to their destination. But King Sihon didn't trust Israel to pass through his land. Instead, he mobilized his army at Jahaz and attacked them. But the Lord, the God of Israel, gave his people victory over King Sihon. So Israel took control of all the land of the Amorites, who lived in that region, from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, and from the eastern wilderness to the Jordan. So you see, it was the Lord, the God of Israel, who took away the land from the Amorites and gave it to Israel. Why then should we give it back to you? You keep whatever your god Chemosh gives you, and we will keep whatever the Lord our God gives us. Are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he try to make a case against Israel for disputed land? Did he go to war against them? Israel has been living here for 300 years, inhabiting Heshbon and its surrounding settlements, all the way to Aroer and its settlements, and in all the towns along the Arnon River. Why have you made no effort to recover it before now? Therefore, I have not sinned against you. Rather, you have wronged me by attacking me. Let the Lord, who is judge, decide today which of us is right, Israel or Ammon. But the king of Ammon paid no attention to Jephthah's message. Okay, I thought I would read all that as one, long passage, just because, it's pretty much a recap of things that happened previously, going back to Exodus, essentially. Like I was talking about before, where Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and toward Canaan, a.k.a. the Promised Land, a.k.a. roughly modern-day Israel. And then, they, as it describes here, they asked for passage through these different kingdoms, but 3 consecutive kings didn't allow them to pass through. The third of which decided to attack the Israelites. But God gave them victory, and that's how they basically came into possession of this land that this Ammonite king is saying was stolen. So, it mostly gets back to what I said before this section of the chapter, that, this was part of the land that was promised by God. He gave it to them because of the prior promise all the way back to Abraham. So, of course, they're not going to want to just give it up. And really, especially if you think about that covenant all the way back to Abraham, that might even give Israel a more rightful claim to this land that they possess. Now, as far as kind of the last section here, first off, 300 years that they've been living in this area. So I guess that means, as of this chapter, it's been roughly 300 years since they settled the Promised Land. So, like, basically, from the end of Exodus up to this point, it's been about 300 years. And Israelites have been living there all this time. There hasn't been a previous claim to this effect made. There was no prior conflict of people or of kingdoms trying to reclaim this land. So, especially, assuming there were other kings over the same group of people, the same kingdom, essentially, over all this 300 years, like, if they had any kind of notable fighting force, you would think they would have tried this earlier. But they hadn't up until this point. So I guess the only assumption in here that is a bit of an assumption is that, they would have had the ability to, make such a claim and try and take this land back previously within this 300-year time span. But, like, kingdoms don't get to this level of power overnight. So, there is a bit of legitimacy to that argument as well. That's not necessarily saying the same logic should apply to certain modern day situations. Because, like, there are times when people when there's just a massive imbalance of power between one country and another, or different things like that. So it makes it harder to, legitimize this kind of reasoning as to, well, why haven't you tried to, claim this land for yourselves before? I'm not going to make any direct associations, but I think if you're smart enough, you could probably, pick up on at least a certain modern day equivalence to what I'm saying. Anywho. Okay. I think that's about enough on that section. Except there's a footnote. It just says the Sea of Reeds in Hebrew at the Red Sea. That was pretty much just the way that they referred to it more so in Hebrew, especially at that time. But current day, it's known as the Red Sea. So for the sake of the reader's understanding, they'll just call it the Red Sea in this translation. All right, so then we get to verse 29. At that time, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he went throughout the land of Gilead and Manasseh, including Mizpah in Gilead. And from there he led an army against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. He said, "If you give me victory over the Ammonites, I will give to the Lord whatever comes out of my house to meet me when I return in triumph. I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." So Jephthah led his army against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave him victory. He crushed the Ammonites, devastating about 20 towns from Aroer to an area near Minnith and as far away as Abel Keramim. In this way, Israel defeated the Ammonites. All right, pausing there real quick. So, now notice it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. People who think there aren't signs of the Trinity in the Old Testament Actually, some think the Trinity is just not even proper biblical thinking to begin with, but Spirit of the Lord. And it capitalizes Spirit here. Whether or not it would have done the equivalent in the original Hebrew, I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely a possible allusion to that. Never mind the outright claim of Jesus, at the end of Matthew, where he says to baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. But anyway, slight tangent, just came to my mind because of that. Anyway, so he gathers up an army against the Ammonites. He makes a vow to the Lord to give, quote, whatever comes out of my house to meet me whenever he gets back, if the Lord gives him victory. That's a pretty bold claim. Because you would think the most likely thing to come out of the house to meet him would be a family member, right? I mean, hardcore dedication there, I guess, but very bold thing that I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people would say, is that really such a good idea? Especially because God generally isn't in favor of putting people up as offerings. But I digress. So then, massive victory against the Ammonites. They're all but wiped out. 20 towns are conquered / reclaimed. Because the Ammonites had come and taken control of parts of Israel at this point. That's why I used the word reclaimed in there, maybe. So anyway, all that happens. And then, after the sweeping victory, we get to verse 34. When Jephthah returned home to Mizpah, his daughter came out to meet him, playing on a tambourine and dancing for joy. She was his one and only child. He had no other sons or daughters. When he saw her, he tore his clothes in anguish. "Oh, my daughter," he cried out, "you have completely destroyed me. You've brought disaster on me, for I have made a vow to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." And she said, "Father, if you have made a vow to the Lord, you must do to me what you have vowed, for the Lord has given you a great victory over your enemies, the Ammonites. But first, let me do this one thing. Let me go up and roam in the hills and weep with my friends for 2 months, because I will die a virgin." "You may go," Jephthah said. And he sent her away for 2 months. She and her friends went into the hills and wept because she would never have children. When she returned home, her father kept the vow he had made, and she died a virgin. So it became a custom in Israel for young Israelite women to go away for 4 days each year to lament the fate of Jephthah's daughter. Okay. I told you that was a risky proposition. And a bold vow to make. But I mean, okay, so there weren't... I suppose it could potentially have been, a servant or somebody like that who would have come out first, potentially. But otherwise, you would have to assume it's a family member. Anywho, so this mostly, assuming this is historically accurate, then it's just kind of going along with, things that happened and explaining all that in detail. because, he made the vow, and it would make sense to explain how that was kept. But also, I guess, gives to the original reader of this way back why this would have been somewhat common, or at least a known practice, for these Israelite women to go away and, lament the fate of Jephthah's daughter, as it's worded here. Now, that's only for 4 days. Jephthah's daughter, was gone for 2 months. But, generally when you're remembering something that happened over a certain length of time, you don't necessarily engage in your remembrance for as long. Really, the main thing that comes to my mind as far as people trying to, mimic the time frame of something in their remembering of that something, some people will, intentionally fast between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, because, it's meant to resemble or remember or recognize or whatever the time period during which Jesus was mortally dead in the tomb. But anyway, so now that I'm done with yet another slight tangent, I don't really have any other particular thoughts. So Jephthah gives Israel a major victory over the Ammonites. Now, it hasn't mentioned the Philistines, but the Ammonites apparently were the bigger threat. So, I don't know. We may or may not read more on Jephthah. But anywho, that's all that I've got for chapter 11. Alright, so we basically got the bulk of the story of Jephthah, who pretty much was cast out by his half-brothers, but then when push came to shove and they needed help, they asked him, and since they agreed that they would make him ruler over their land, he agreed, helped them, vowed to God that he would sacrifice who or whatever came out of his house to greet him first. Upon return, if he was successful, he succeeds, and then comes the unfortunate part where he must then sacrifice his daughter to God. Yeah. But I guess at least there was victory over the Ammonites, so there's a positive, I guess, out of all that. But anyway, that's the general gist of what happened in the chapter. So, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this over on Rumble, give me a follow there. Either way, look down in the description to get info on other social media pages. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.